On October 14th of 2006, police received a 911 call from a nice home out in rural Iowa. Minutes later, they would enter their property and find a crime scene unlike any they had ever witnessed. This is the case of the Bentler family. Hello, friend, and welcome to High Time Crime. My name's Joel, and on here I specialize in true crime and also having knickknacks at my desk. This is my gnome with a gun. And this is my swinging vampire friend. But anyway, today we're going over a case about a young man who never learned how to grow up and the deadly consequences that came from this. The Bentler family consisted of Michael and Sandra, the parents, and their 4 children, including 3 girls and a boy. From oldest to youngest, the children's names were Sean, age 23, Sheena Bentler, age 17, Shelby, age 15, and Shani, age 14. All together, they lived in a small town called Bonaparte, Iowa, which was named after none other than Napoleon Bonaparte himself, the famous French conqueror. Bonaparte is not so different from other Iowan towns. It's filled with lots of cornfields and greenery, and the population is extremely small. When this took place, Bonaparte was home to around 440 people, but has since shrunk to only 359 during the last census. So really, it's practically the exact dictionary definition of a small town. Now, overall, the Bentlers were very well off financially, and it's not a stretch to say likely some of the wealthiest members of their small community. They owned multiple businesses, including a mill and feed store and a pair of lumber yards. The property that they lived on was worth a grand total of $2.8 million, and it included 445 acres. The home itself was around 4,000 square feet, and it had 3 levels, a game room, and a pool outside. And the top level provided a great view of the Des Moines River. Michael Bentler had grown up in Fort Madison, Iowa in the 1950s and 60s. Michael was 53 years old when this story took place, and he had started out as a carpenter early on before getting into his other endeavors. At some point, while living in Fort Madison, he met a woman by the name of Sandra, and they hit it off. Then, for a brief period of time, the pair moved to Colorado, and while there, they wound up getting married. But after having a home built in Bonaparte, the same one we talked about, they moved back home to Iowa to live there permanently. Shortly thereafter, the Bentlers then became the owners of the Mount Pleasant Lumber Yard, the Mount Hamel Lumber Yard, along with a mill and feed store, and a grain elevator business. Also, by then, they had already started a family, and as the years passed, that family only grew and grew. But while the Bentlers had a lot going for them, like many families, they had a black sheep, and his name was Sean. Now, let's just say that Sean had a certain aura about him that didn't match the rest of his household. Oh, and speaking of aura, they just so happen to be today's sponsor. I'm not sure if you know this or not, but there's a chance that hackers could possibly have stolen every American's social security number. Let me explain. In early 2024, a huge breach happened to National Public Data. They're the ones who provide the information to employers and companies performing background checks. And over 2.9 billion records were stolen. They could have stolen someone's address, their phone number, their full name, date of birth, or even their social security number. Not only this, but this information was released online and for free. As someone who has been hacked before, not once, not even twice, and had money stolen, It's not a fun process to go through. Trust me. But the internet and your vulnerability on it are greater than they've ever been. And this should really give you that nudge to take some sort of precaution. Personally, I'm not really worried about it anymore because I use Aura. Aura does a great job at keeping an eye on your personal information, such as your social security number across a number of sources, which could include either the dark web or public court records. So that way they can detect and then alert you in case of any potential identity threats. If the literal worst thing happens, then Aura will give up to $5 million in identity theft insurance. Inside of just one app, they also give you a ton of other features in order to make sure you're safe on the internet. Go to aura.com/hightimecrime, or you can click the link in my description to try 14 days free of Aura. That will give Aura enough time to go through and see if any of your personal data has been leaked. I really recommend that you take this advice because you never know what could possibly be out there that you don't want to be. I am not going to have another breach happen to me, and my information won't be stolen again. If you don't want yours to be either, go to aura.com/hightimecrime. The Bentlers' eldest and only son, Sean Michael Bentler, was born on February 5th of 1984. Growing up, Sean was a relatively normal kid. He went hunting with his father and had a decent amount of close friends and was just generally pretty well socialized. As a teen and early on in high school, he worked at his parents' business and his father paid him $5 an hour. The high school Sean went to was known as Harmony High School, and it was located in Farmington, which is about 8 minutes away from Bonaparte. Sean's school had a total of only 40 students in his class, and in terms of grades, he performed pretty average. Overall, Sean was a well-behaved student who was on the track team and didn't get in trouble that often. According to friends, Sean was friendly and nice during his first few years in high school, but then took on a bit of a change following the summer of 11th grade. After that summer, when school started up again and he became a senior, he suddenly shifted to bullying others and bragging about his parents' wealth. One of the kids he bullied was named Eric, and one day Sean's excessive bragging and attitude triggered a fight between these two. After this, the pair were both suspended from school for a period of time, and that was that. Outside of school, Sean was relatively close with his family. Sean's family, particularly his parents, were all well respected in town. They were seen as very nice and well-meaning people. The Bentler parents were the types who went to every sports game and were heavily invested in their kids' lives. Sean's sister Sheena was 4 years younger than him and born on November 9th of 1988. Sheena was a very promising 17-year-old girl. She was highly athletic and on 3 different sports teams, including the softball team, the basketball team, and cross-country team. She was also very intelligent and academically gifted. Sheena was a part of both the National Honor Society and the Society for Academic Achievement. She had the highest GPA in her class and was even projected to be the valedictorian. Personality-wise, Sheena was described as tomboyish, and she liked to go hunting with her father. Meanwhile, the younger Bentler sisters were not that different in many respects. They were too quite academically gifted and athletic. Shelby was the second oldest at 15 and born on December 27th of 1990. Unlike her sister, Shelby was a girly girl who absolutely loved to cook. Shelby also liked animals and to entertain people. And just like her sister, she played sports, all the same sports in fact. She was on the softball team, the basketball team, and the cross-country team. and Shelby too was a part of both the National Honor Society and the Society for Academic Achievement. The youngest Bentler sister was the 14-year-old Shani. Shani was born on May 26th of 1992, and yet again, Shani played softball and basketball on top of being on the track team. Shani was highly intelligent, a free spirit, and a member of the art club at school, something she loved being a part of. By all accounts, Sean Bentler's relationship with his sisters was pretty good early on. He never really fought with them much, and he even drove them from school time to time. After graduating from high school in the summer of 2002, Sean moved to a place called Quincy, Illinois, which is a little more than an hour away from Bonaparte. Here in Quincy, he settled into an apartment with a friend by the name of Keith. Sean also began attending school at John Wood Community College. Now, the most consistent theme in Sean Bentler's life was a lack of any sense of responsibility. According to his best friend Keith, Sean was a calm and friendly guy, but extremely lazy and bad at paying the bills on time. In November of 2002, Sean dropped out of college after only one semester. Around the same time, a girlfriend he had, who we'll call Carrie, became pregnant and gave birth to Sean's first child, a little girl. This relationship ended shortly after the girl was born, and in late spring the following year, in 2003, Sean moved into a different apartment with a friend named Nathan. Throughout the course of his time living here, the theme of Sean avoiding responsibilities continued. He had a job at Home Depot for a bit, and then Lowe's Home Improvement. But despite this, he somehow never had any money, and he called in sick a lot. Only 3 months after living in his new apartment, his roommate Nathan asked him to leave after discovering paraphernalia in his room and because of his inability to pay rent. Evidently, Nathan didn't really have an issue with Sean smoking the good green. It was just that he couldn't be keeping the equipment for it at the apartment. So following Sean's being kicked out from here, he then moved back to Iowa for a bit to work at his family's lumber business. During this period, he actually achieved some degree of financial stability. His father paid him well, and he learned a lot about carpentry and building houses. But like a lot of good things, it just wasn't meant to last. By 2005, Sean officially moved back to Quincy, Illinois. This time, he moved into a house with his friend Keith and another friend named Travis. Like a couple years before, Sean soon found himself struggling to help pay the bills again. He had gotten a job at a car dealership, but he had no ability to save money. On top of this, Sean had begun dating a new girl by then named Leslie and gotten her pregnant. The girl would go on to have another daughter, and the pair would break up. So now Sean, who already had to pay child support for one child, would have to pay child support for 2 children. According to Keith, Sean's money issues just got progressively worse over time. Before long, he began resorting to desperate measures in order to acquire money. While Sean refused to ask his mother and father for money up front, he had no problem taking money from them behind their backs. Soon he began traveling back to Iowa periodically and stealing jewelry and money from his parents' safe. Evidently, Sean stole as much as $150 in change and pawned all the jewelry he took. Additionally, he even stole gasoline from them. Then, in the following year, in 2006, things continued to get worse for Sean in every way imaginable. In May of that year, he was arrested for possession of paraphernalia. Then, around mid-September, Sean missed a court appearance for this charge, and it became a looming, unresolved issue. At the same time, Sean kept his parents in the dark about his issues. According to Keith, the last time he saw Sean with his parents was during a visit to Reservoir Park in Quincy. The visit took place in early fall, and Sean and friends went to the park to play tennis while Sean's parents met up with him and brought him a cooler of pulled pork. During this point, the relationship between Sean and his parents seemed okay. But one of the last notable things to happen in 2006, and something that was likely a trigger for what would happen, was that Sean got fired from his job. Like we discussed earlier, Sean worked at a car dealership during this period. Now, apparently, Sean liked working at the dealership, and frequently he would even brag about his success selling cars. For whatever reason, though, this never translated to being able to pay the bills or child support payments on time. And then he got fired. As for why, well, just like his other jobs, he was absent and calling out sick a lot, and had even told management that his father had died of a heart attack. However, when his managers called up to his family's business to express their condolences, they soon realized that Sean's father was actually alive, and that Sean was lying about the whole ordeal. The same night that Sean was fired, he went out to a bar and got drunk, and while there, he spoke with a fellow employee from the car dealership. According to the employee, after he expressed his condolences about Sean's father, Sean said to him, "I was never that close to him anyway." Now, this statement was not all that different from other things he had said to his co-workers about his father. He also apparently told them that he hated his father and wanted nothing to do with him. And before long, Sean just found himself completely unable to cope with the stresses of life as an adult. During the first week of October, he reportedly told his baby's mother, Leslie, that he, quote-unquote, wouldn't have money troubles when his parents were dead. The bills were adding up, and as far as Sean was concerned, there was only one option remaining, and that was cold-blooded murder. Late at night on October 13th of 2006, one of Sean's roommates by the name of Travis went to a football game. While there, Travis got a little drunk, and when he returned home around 1 to 2 a.m. the next morning, he saw Sean laying down on the apartment's couch. Travis spoke with Sean for a bit, but the conversation was brief and transitory. And afterwards, Travis went to his room and fell asleep. Upon waking up at 6:30 a.m., Travis exited his room and saw Sean was still on the couch. Then, following another brief exchange with Sean, Travis left the home, got into his car, and noticed the gas tank was about a quarter less full than the day before. Now, it was no secret that every now and again, Sean borrowed his roommate's car without asking. So this didn't really set off many alarm bells in Travis's head. He just correctly assumed it was Sean, thought nothing of it, and proceeded to head off to work. By the way, the make and model of Travis's vehicle was a Ford Festiva, which is kind of this boxy, compact little car. Later that same morning, around 8 a.m., Sean's other roommate, Keith, who was actually his former roommate by that point, and had since moved out a few weeks prior, stopped by Sean's house. While Keith was there, he saw Sean sleeping on the couch, and after sticking around for a while, Sean woke up. Shortly after arriving, Keith received a phone call from his mother informing him that the entire Bentley family had been killed and that Sean was the main suspect. To Keith, this seemed almost unbelievable. First of all, Sean was literally sitting right in front of him and acting as calm as could be. And second, throughout the entirety of the over 20 years Keith knew Sean, he never anticipated Sean could ever commit such a heinous act. So by this point, Keith was practically shaking. And after getting off the phone with his mother, Keith directly asked Sean when the last time he saw his family was, to which Sean replied that he had seen them the day before. Keith then told Sean to try calling his family to see what was happening, but Sean told him that he had left his phone in his mother's car. In response, Keith handed his phone over to Sean and had him call his mother that way. When Sean dialed his mother's phone number, no one picked up on the other end. So Sean calmly gave Keith back his phone and gave no indication of being worried. The reality, though, was that Sean was of course hiding something, and deep down Keith knew this clear as day. That's why right after Sean handed him his phone back, Keith left the house, got back into his car, and drove back home. He even called out of work that day because of how unsettled he was. 2 hours later, at 10:15 a.m., Sean was riding his motorcycle a few blocks away from his house when the police pulled him over. After pulling him over, police officers requested his license and registration, but soon realized that not only was Sean's license not valid because it was from Iowa, but he also had no insurance for the vehicle. As a result, Sean was taken in for custody. While in custody, police discovered that he also had an outstanding warrant. The warrant was for traffic violations, possession of paraphernalia, and Sean's refusal to show up in court. So because of this, Sean was lodged in the Adams County Jail. At first, his original bail started out at $1,000. So Sean called up Keith in an attempt to get him to help him bail him out, but Keith declined. Then, within some time, a significantly more nefarious accusation came into light. Police at the station soon figured out that this same guy that they had taken in for an entirely different reason was also the main suspect in the murder of his entire family. Murders that took place only hours before. Upon making this shocking revelation, officers from Iowa came in to interrogate Sean about what he knew about his family's murders. During his interrogation, Sean was first read his Miranda rights, and then the Iowan police officers informed him about the deaths of his family members. Predictably, Sean then began crying, but the officers reportedly found his act to be unconvincing, so much so that they called it crocodile tears. But shortly after this, Sean then told the Iowan police officers he had no knowledge about the deaths of his parents nor siblings. He also claimed that the last time he saw his mother Sandra was the night before around 10:30 p.m. on October 13th of 2006. Sean said his mother came to visit him for about 20 minutes, and together the pair spent most of the time in his mother's Chevy Tahoe. Similar to what he told Keith, Sean made the claim that he left his cell phone in his mother's car. But naturally, police were quite skeptical about all of Sean's claims and his crocodile tears. Following his interrogation, Sean's bond soared all the way up to $2.5 million. And soon it became clear that exactly what happened to the Bentler family was a bit closer to home than Sean insisted. So at 10:20 p.m. on October 13th of 2006, one of Sandra Bentler's nieces called the family's landline telephone in order to speak with the 14-year-old Shani. Over the phone while speaking, the niece heard Sandra say to Shani, "Don't stay up too late." But if you remember, Sean claimed in his interrogation that during this exact period of time, his mother Sandra had paid him a visit. So in other words, Sandra Bentler was actually at home, and Sean had been caught in a lie here. But as it turns out, this would only be the first domino to fall. According to records, later the following morning at 3:38 a.m. on October 14th, local Van Buren County Police received a 911 call from a home out in Bonaparte. The caller nervously identified herself as Shani Bentler, the youngest member of the Bentler family. She then gave her location and said she was making the call because her mother told her to. The dispatcher asked Shani if her mother was ill, and Shani replied that she wasn't. Shani was quoted as saying, "There's like somebody I don't know. My brother's going to do something, but I don't know what. My mother's yelling at him, saying, 'Sean, don't.'" Seconds later, a loud gunshot rang out. This gunshot was then followed by a creaking sound that authorities believed to have been Shaney's closet door being forced open. Right after this, Shaney can be heard shouting, "Sean, no!" and another gunshot. Then the line on the other phone went dead. This entire phone call was approximately a minute long. At about the 20-second mark, another call came in from the Bentlers' home, that time from Shelby Bentler, but because the dispatcher was busy talking to Shaney, they were unable to answer it. The first deputy to arrive at the Bentlers' residence made his way inside and noticed a few things right away. 1, the lights were off, and 2, the TV was still playing. Then, as he made his way further inside, he uncovered an absolutely horrific crime scene. So based on the evidence, here's what really happened in the early hours of October 14th of 2006. Around 2 to 2:10 a.m., Sean Bentler exited his home in Quincy, Illinois, hopped into his roommate's Ford Festiva, and began making the drive out to Bonaparte, Iowa. About an hour and 20 minutes later, he arrived at his family's home. The time was now close to 3:30 in the morning. After pulling up to the home, Sean got out and made his way inside. At the time, it was still relatively dark inside the home, and Sean's family were fast asleep. Sean's first stop was to the basement, where his father kept his collection of rifles. After entering the basement, Sean opened up the gun cabinet and grabbed a .22 caliber rifle. Once he had it in his hands, he began loading it up, and then slowly made his way back up the basement steps. While doing so, he accidentally dropped a round on one of the steps and never attempted to pick it up. But after making his way back to the first floor, Sean then proceeded across the floor to the top of yet another set of stairs. This set of stairs led downward to a separate part of the basement, which had become his 17-year-old sister Sheena's bedroom. After heading down the steps with the gun, Sean entered Sheena's bedroom, then shot and killed her. Now, because of the fact that he was on the lowest level of the house at this point, Sean incorrectly assumed that nobody sleeping upstairs would be able to hear the gun being fired. So after walking back up the steps, he quietly shut the basement door and moved across the living room to the staircase that led to the second floor. Next, Sean began his slow march up the staircase with the .22 caliber rifle held firmly in his hands. After reaching the top of the staircase, he entered the second floor hallway. Sean would make his way to his parents' bedroom, and his mother Sandra had just woken up after hearing the gunshots. Sandra was now standing next to the door of the master bedroom, and when Sean approached her, he immediately shot her in the jaw, but didn't kill her. After that, Sandra ran to her husband, Michael, who was still in bed, and began yelling at him to get up. Once Michael got up, he quickly jumped out of bed and attempted to confront Sean, but in turn, Sean hit his father with the butt of the rifle before turning it around and shooting him in the leg and then the head. At the same time, Sandra managed to run past Sean and yell out in the hallway, telling her kids to call the police. But before she could completely run away, Sean turned around and shot Sandra again while she was still in the hallway near the top of the steps. Sandra fell back and slumped over a chair that was positioned behind her. By this point, Sean had killed his mother, father, and one of his sisters. But next, he moved on to his youngest sister, Shaney's room. If you remember, Shaney had successfully managed to call 911 while hiding in her closet, but while she was still on the phone, Sean pulled open the door and then shot and killed her. Finally, after this, Sean entered his sister Shelby's room, pulled open her closet door, and shot and killed her too. Now that Sean had finished committing this terrible atrocity, the next part of his poorly thought out plan involved a bit of deception and cover-up. First, he took his phone and placed it on the wicker table to make it appear as if his story about his mother visiting his home was true. Then he left the home, got back into the Ford Festiva, and drove to a road behind the house. Next to this road was a ditch, and upon reaching the area, Sean threw the rifle he had used in the ditch. and after this, he drove back home as if nothing had ever happened. Upon doing their homicide investigation, police officers found tread marks matching the tires of a Ford Festiva and then Shaney's cell phone, which had been placed on the round wicker table in the hallway of the upper level. According to authorities, the exact location of the cell phone on the table is what made them realize that it was likely placed there intentionally as opposed to accidentally. Other evidence showed Sean's fingerprints on the rifle, DNA samples belonging to him at the crime scene, surveillance footage that contradicted his story, and cell phone tower data. But perhaps the biggest giveaway that Sean was responsible was the 911 phone call where his name was explicitly said multiple times. That's why following his trial on May 24th of 2007, Sean Bentler was officially convicted on 5 counts of first-degree murder. A month later, he was then sentenced to 5 consecutive life sentences, one for each innocent person murdered. The general consensus from Sean's horrible crimes is that he was the type who never had the will or desire to grow up. He just wanted to smoke and skip out on a ton of work and never take responsibility for his own failures. His motivation in killing his family was to inherit his parents' money, but in the end, that money was split between his 2 children. Meanwhile, Sean himself is in prison for the rest of his life, the exact place where he deserves to be. Now, this case really hit home for me because I have a big family of my own. The Bentlers were a big, loving family who everyone respected. Even during the trial, the Bentlers had 100 family members in the courtroom, many of whom gave extremely heartwarming testimonies about how great each of them were. And it's true, the Bentlers were great. There's absolutely no reason they needed to have their lives taken away from them on that dark, dark morning. Rest in peace to Michael Bentler, Sandra Bentler, Sheena Bentler, Shelby Bentler, and Shaney Bentler. But anyways, thank you for watching this episode of High Time Crime. If true crime is your thing, then please like and subscribe because it's all we do. I also have an all-exclusive Patreon if you're interested in that. There's a bunch of tiers to choose from, and the third one allows for you to see a Patreon-only video, and that tier and the second one allow you to have your name at the end of each High Time Crime video. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care, friend.